Hi there, everybody. Welcome again to the Keto 101 Summit. I am so honored to have yet another fantastic speaker over here to my side. We have Willie Villarreal, and I'm hoping I pronounced the last name right because as you're seeing, I'm slaughtering everyone's last name throughout the summit. But he's obviously in his clinic right now, but he obviously has a medical background, but he also has an athletic background. And I'm going to allow him to go through and really just share that because he's got some great information to share with you today regarding sports performance, but he's going to be able to explain a lot of just different things that he sees in his clinic as well. And so it's something that a lot of the population is dealing with too. I don't want to give too much information. So give us a little bit about your background.
Well, thank you for having me on. I feel super, super honored to be sharing, the summit with everybody, some of the top keto minds. I mean, it's an awesome summit. So my job is going to be to kind of, like we talked about earlier, is break down, ketosis, the ketogenic lifestyle, how it pertains to sports performance and recovery, and some of the metabolic issues I'm seeing in layman's terms. So I want people to understand it easier. But my background is basically I own Core Sports Recovery, Core Sports Health in Conroe, Texas. I'm a family nurse practitioner. I'm in the process of finishing my doctorate, my DNP, and actually I'm starting May 7th on my capstone project, which will be on ketogenic diet.
That's awesome.
And how we use it for metabolic therapies. A lot of places it's starting to be real mainstream. John Hopkins University uses it. I mean, Mayo Clinic. There's a lot of people from Dr. Eric Westman at Duke to Dr. Jeff Bollig and Steve Finnick. I mean, there's lots of great people that are starting to really embrace, spread across the nation. And, I'm really want to be on that leading edge of it as far as using nutrition as medicine, right? So my background is kind of outside of the box thinking. I'm medical, but I'm a little bit different as far as the medical model. Okay. I like to be outside of the box thinking. I like to come at things, and primarily because of my athletic background, which I'll get into in a minute. But basically what I started seeing is that what worked very, very well with my athletes to perform at a very high level with my elite athletes translated very well to my people that, patients that just want to feel better, right? Your everyday person that wants to feel better. So a lot of it that we're not doing is through nutrition. In medical school, they're not teaching nutrition unless a primary care or any doc takes a personal interest in nutrition. You're just not going to get that piece. Okay. The typical medical models, you come in, I spend 5, 10, 15 minutes with you, and, you tell me what you have. I write a script, diagnose you, and here's a script, and come back and see me in 90 days. And then I'll refill your script. Right. And we're basically doing Band-Aid care or sick care, right? Everybody waits till they're sick and then they come see us. Mm-hmm. Everybody waits till they hit their rock bottom. My goal, my focus is on prevention. I want to get to people before they get sick, and I want to kind of shift the paradigm to that because people think that it's too expensive, or is it, all the money that you think you're saving, right, from not eating healthy on healthy foods or healthy lifestyle is gone in one diagnosis, right? One ER visit, So, my background basically is kind of varied. I like to do a lot of different things medically. I've worked in surgery for over 20 years. I own a surgical assist company also called Capstone Surgical Associates. I'm an RN first assistant, so I assist in all the surgeries. And my main background was in cardiac open heart surgery. So for many, many years, I saw the ravages of metabolic issues like diabetes, atherosclerosis, heart disease. And so I did the vein harvesting. I would be down at the leg taking the vein for the bypasses, and then I'd come up top and assist. And I did that for many, many years. It was a really, really big passion of mine. And I worked on the cardiovascular team and the trauma team. So I saw a lot of things. I've been exposed to a lot of things on that medical side, on the deep down level, right, on hands-on level. But again, what I saw when I started getting into medicine, we all got into medicine to help people, right? You did. I'm sure a lot of the other docs in the summit did. But when we get into medicine now, we see we're helping very, very few people, right? So again, I think we need to start looking at good medicine as how many patients we can take off medicine instead of how many patients we can put on, right? So a lot of that is through prevention. So like I said, I own Core Sports Recovery. I take care of a lot of patients. I specialize in hormone therapy primarily, but also nutritional therapy through ketogenic therapy. I specialize in ketogenic therapy. I use a lot of exogenous ketones. I use a lot of outside of the box supplements and thinking, from supplements to prescriptions, not your typical prescriptions. But basically I also specialize in sports performance, recovery. That's a whole other passion of mine. Everybody wants to train, and work out, but nobody does anything for active recovery, or, knows what active recovery is. So they end up breaking down. So that's another, kind of love and passion of mine. So we're kind of varied. I have the cool job of working with a lot of elite athletes. So I work with UFC fighters, pro boxers, pro bodybuilders, physique competitors, CrossFitters. The 3 people went to the CrossFit Games last year, all ketogenic, by the way. And so, it's really, really shifting. I take care of a lot of Ironman triathletes. So a lot of the stuff that I'll talk about and I'll kind of touch on is on endurance athletes. And we've all known about that as far as the benefits of ketogenic diet for it. But that's basically my background. What I want to kind of go over, and I'm going to kind of look back because I don't want to miss any notes. My whole goal is to talk about, when I talk about hormone therapy, everybody talks about, mainly testosterone, thyroid, there's a lot of hormone dysfunction, a lot of metabolic dysfunction. Everybody talks about, well, how come everybody's low testosterone? Well, guess what? Insulin resistance is one of the biggest causes of low testosterone, and on the flip side, PCOS for women, right? I had a talk with one of my surgeons today. He's an OB-GYN surgeon, very well respected, and he says we're seeing an explosion. He's seeing an explosion in PCOS over the last. I mean, one has to just look around. Don't take my word for it. Just go to Target, go to Walmart, go anywhere. 3/4 of the people that you see are all overweight, obese, and we're not winning the war on diabetes. We're not winning the war on obesity. So something's got to give, right? Mm-hmm. So it needs to start with nutrition. But for the purpose of this, I could go way down a rabbit hole and talk about a lot of other things, but I want to kind of focus and really concentrate on debunking the myth, or that, that we need carbs for sports performance. Okay. I have had a lot of success over the last 5+ years with ketogenic therapy with my patients, with my athletes. And so the common belief with ketogenic diet is basically, they'll say, it's great for losing weight. It's great for, losing weight and fat, but you can't maintain strength. You can't build muscle, and you can't improve athletic performance. It's absolutely false. My job today is going to be not so much to just put it out and just say, hey, ketogenic diet's better, right? Because there are a lot of high performers, a lot of high-end athletes that do well on carbs. And so that my job here today isn't really to convince anybody that it's a better, just to make it, just to lay the foundation that it's a viable option and it actually does work, okay? And it actually debunks the myth that you can't do a lot of these things unless you carb up, and that's totally not true. Right. So I'm just going to touch on, like I said, I'm not going to go way on studies, but I kind of want to mention a few that are very, very big. Okay. One of them, the first myth about negatively affecting strength, Paoli did a big study. It's Paoli. And he basically, the conclusion of that study, they took all these elite gymnasts, and the coaches actually didn't like it. The coaches were very, very afraid of instituting this ketogenic diet with these elite gymnasts. But what they found is basically, despite all the concerns of the coaches and the doctors about the possible detrimental effects of low carb diets on athletic performance, the elite athletes were able to follow a very low carb ketogenic diet with no negative effects on strength or performance. I mean, that's just a basic one. And they all had decrease in body weight, decrease in body fat, but they all maintained their strength. They tested them with certain strength parameters before and after, and it was the same. The next thing was, the next myth is that negatively affects performance. There's a really big study by Zajac on it's ZAJAC in 2014 on the effects of ketogenic diet on these elite cyclists. Cyclists too, or these endurance athletes, and basically their objective was to determine the effects of a long-term ketogenic diet on aerobic performance, and exercise metabolism in off-road cyclists. Okay, the cyclists utilize a keto-only diet followed by a mixed diet. And on their findings, basically, the ketogenic diet, it stimulated favorable changes in body mass, body composition, lipid profiles, lipoprotein profile. I mean, significant increase in VO2 max, oxygen uptake at lactate threshold. So all the things that I'm seeing real world, okay, I mean, we're seeing it. There's studies to back it up. So people are always, for the show me the studies people, the studies are there. And I haven't even gotten to my favorite one. Like the best one is the FASTER study. Okay, I love the FASTER study. The FASTER study just blew everything out of the water. Okay, the FASTER study basically was done by Dr. Jeff Volek and Steve Finney, and it was done in, it was published in 2016, but it stands for the Fat Adapted Substrate Oxidation in Trained Elite Runners. Okay, FASTER, the FASTER study. So what it did is it was a long, robust 20-month study. Okay, it wasn't a short study. It wasn't, and it was really cool because what it did is it was designed to look at the physiological differences between elite male runners. They took all these guys, not just elites. Some of these guys had national and international records in Ironman and ultras. Okay, and what they did is they had them follow a conventional high carb diet. Half of them, 10 of them, there's 20 people, 10 and 10, and the other 10 followed a low carb fat adapted strategy. The FASTER study, like I said, it was a very robust study, and it's very hard to get a lot of these elite athletes all together in one room. So Volek and them, actually, what they did is they took advantage of it, and they did very in-depth muscle biopsy testing, cheek cell analysis. They went through their feces and urine. It was crazy. They looked at their gut bacteria. So they didn't just look at blood, which, that was standard. And the findings were crazy. It blew everything out of the water as far as what we understand about carbs. Okay, basically it involved the 20 athletes. The low carb group, they sat around about 71% fat, about 10% protein, 19% protein, 10% carbs, and they did it for at least 6 months. That's important, okay, because it takes a while to become keto adapted. And I'll go into just a tiny bit, a little bit, but most studies are done for 4 weeks, 6 weeks. Like, hey, the low carb doesn't work. Keto doesn't work. Well, that wasn't long enough to get keto adapted. Plain and simple, it isn't. So after the 20-month study, the biggest takeaway from it is the glycogen resynthesis. The study, basically the thinking has always been, for glycolytic, pathway, you can't do a highly glycolytic workout or a long endurance work. You can't replenish your glycogen stores unless you eat a lot of carbs. Okay. Well, guess what? After every workout, despite the low carb group getting only about 4 grams of carbs in their post-workout shake and the high carb group getting 40 plus carbs in their post-workout shake, they basically had the same degree of glycogen replenishment. Okay. At the end of the 20-month study, their glycogen replenishment, they were both able to replenish their glycogen stores the same way, irregardless of how much carbs they took in. But guess what? The low carb, high fat had a way higher VO2 max and threshold, and they could go harder longer, and they were able to use more fat oxidation. They were able to use, basically fat for fuel a lot better than obviously the carb group could not tap into that fat store that they had.
That's so awesome.
Yeah. Lately, I've talked a little bit. I didn't really go into my athletic background. So my athletic background is basically CrossFit. I'm one of the masters CrossFit competitors in the old guys division. In 2015, I was number 3 in the world after the CrossFit Open, and that was out of 20,000+ people worldwide. And I was fixing to go to the games. I went to regionals, and I got hurt. I suffered a small back injury, and I got hurt, and I dropped from 3rd to 23rd. Well, other people dropped out, which moved me up a little bit. I got excited. Well, I ended up 21. So I was 1 spot out of the games that year, the CrossFit Games. And they take top 20 in the world. So I was just 1 spot out. But CrossFit's always been like near and dear to my heart. So I do a lot of the Granite Games competitions, the big, qualifier competitions. And so what I've seen is it's always been said that you can't do keto and have the energy to do these, workouts. You have to have carbs. And we're seeing that now there's 2 big studies that have just come out. There's one on ketogenic.com about, what if ran on fat. There's 2 big 6-week studies on CrossFit and ketosis. And the main takeaway from those studies, one of them is by Gregory et al. 2016. Basically, they showed after a 6-week low-carb ketogenic diet, and they did a CrossFit program, they all had decreases in fat mass, maintained muscle mass, which we know that happens with ketosis, and they improved their overall CrossFit times in the same workouts that they did before and after. So it just, the studies are there, they're coming, and it mimics what we're seeing in the real world. Now, going back, why does why do all the experts say, they still claim low carb keto is detrimental to performance? Well, they point to research. Well, all the research is basically lacking. The key fundamental thing that's lacking in all the research is time. It's keto adaptation. If you look at all the studies that say keto doesn't work, they're 4-week studies, 6-week studies. They don't really follow a true keto diet. Producing ketones, that does not equal keto adaptation. It takes a while for the body to become keto adapted. Okay, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 3 months sometimes. You're still keto adapting after 6 months. So it takes a while, and that's what's missing in a lot of the studies. Basically, over the course of, a few weeks to months, the body adapts, to a high-fat, low-carb diet and then begins using the ketones. Now, thank God, at my clinic, we have a much better way. We use exogenous ketones. I'm a huge believer in exogenous ketones. The things I've seen, it actually bypasses. When I used to fat adapt or keto adapt an athlete, I always warned them. I said, hey, by the way, until your body adapts and shifts away from relying on carbs all the time, you may have a drop in performance. It was expected. We're not seeing that anymore. Okay, we're not seeing that across the board with any of my clients, because we're giving them that BHB, we're giving them that beta hydroxybutyrate to bridge that gap. Okay, from the lack of that energy substrate. So it mimics what we're seeing, what studies are showing. And there's a really cool study that they did last month actually, but I'll kind of touch on those. So what are the benefits? What are the benefits? Okay. There's lots of benefits of keto adaptation to ketones. And when I keep saying ketones, understand that ketosis, people keep trying to complicate it. They can't wrap their head around it. Oh, was it nutritional ketosis, dietary? Ketosis, it doesn't matter. Ketosis is elevated blood ketone levels. That's all it is. The benefits you get from ketosis, which is what you're trying to do through the diet, is get into ketosis, trying to get into like 1 to 3 millimolar, right? And that's kind of a sweet spot, is from the elevated blood ketone level. So whether you do it through diet or you do it through exogenous ketones, it doesn't matter. The exogenous ketones, what we're seeing is they're actually amplifying the diet. Dr. Jacob Wilson and them have actually said that in the lab, they've seen where, they used to fear that taking exogenous ketones would kind of hurt the person as far as them being able to keto adapt through food. And now what we're actually seeing is it actually amplifies the diet. So what it does, it sensitizes the liver to more readily make endogenous ketones. So it kind of teaches the liver. So you've heard about people like that have been doing ketogenic diet for about a year, that all of a sudden they can eat a cheat meal, and then, before it would take them 3, 4, 5 days, but now they're so used to it. After about a year, 2 years of keto adaptation, they get back into ketosis in like 1 day. That's kind of the same thing. So real quick, what are the benefits, right? So number 1, ketones, whenever your body is making through ketosis, they produce greater ATP output, okay, with less oxygen required to burn them and less what we call ROS, or reactive oxidative stress, so less free radicals, right? Number 2, low-carb ketogenic diet or PTK, or pure therapeutic ketones, that increase ketone levels above 1 millimolar, okay? They increase brain uptake of ketones, and they account for about half the brain's fuel. So you perform better, you function better. What elite athletes know that sets them apart is the mental preparation, the mental aspect. When we get to high levels of CrossFit, of Ironman, of, Olympic, anything, if you're the same on paper, what's going to be the difference between me beating you and you beating me? It's all mental. Whoever's more mentally prepared is going to win. So number 3, improves cognition and focus during and after training. Okay. Number 4, protects against the bonk. Okay. That's one thing I really, really see with ketosis or pure exogenous ketones, or just ketosis, keto adaptation in general. It delays the bonk. Okay. It delays the time that the body will actually dive into those glycogen stores. Okay. And also central fatigue. It delays the central fatigue. Number 5, this one's really cool. Allows you to push past perceived limits, or basically your autonomic nervous shutdown system. Okay. We still don't understand the mechanism of this, but the autonomic nervous shutdown system, basically it's what keeps us from hurting ourselves, right? It's what keeps us, because the body is saying, hey, stop, you better stop before you hurt yourself. Okay. Navy SEALs, elite warfighters, they all train this. Whenever you think your body's telling you you're done, stop, you're only 40% done. You still have 60% in the tank. In CrossFit, we call it going to that dark place. We call it, the pain cave. We call it, there's different things. When I was doing a CrossFit workout, my coach would look at me and goes, man, I knew when you weren't paying attention to me anymore. He's like, I knew when your eyes glassed over, you were just moving. And that's what happens. You just kind of learn how to push past that. Well, the ketones have actually been shown to, when you're producing ketones, it's actually been shown to push past those perceived limits. Okay. Brain protection and repair. This one is super, super close to me and like near and dear to my heart. Basically, ketones provide substrates to help repair damaged neurons. This is huge for TBI and CTE. Okay. CTE is chronic traumatic encephalopathy. That is what you hear. That's a fancy word for brain damage that football players are getting. Okay. So if you haven't watched Concussion by Dr. Amalu, it's about Dr. Amalu. It's a big deal. Concussions are on the rise in pro athletes and youth. 1 in 5 high school students, they sustain a concussion every year, 1 in 5. And this increases the risk of neurodamage by like 40%, 39%. 90% of the diagnosed concussions don't even involve a loss of consciousness, and they go undetected. So a lot of times they'll come to the sideline and look them over and go back in. Well, it's the constant pounding. So high school, then to college, and they just get worse and worse. So what these hits do is they produce an energy crisis. Okay. Basically, after brain injury or a concussion, the brain needs an immense amount of energy to repair. Okay. And it has an impaired ability it also, at the same time, it has an impaired ability to use glucose as energy. Well, guess what? It doesn't have an impaired ability to use ketones as energy. Okay. It's a lot less, it's a lot easier to use ketones. The brain loves ketones. The brain prefers ketones, actually. The brain runs 38% more efficient on ketones. I can't wait to hear like Dr. Deb Hodges, like on her, talk on the summit. But she's a real guru on that. So this energy crisis basically causes a secondary injury because they're not getting the energy they need, the glucose they need, or the energy they need to heal the brain. Okay. So again, they're on the rise. What are the benefits of ketosis for TBI and CTE, or chronic traumatic encephalopathy? Well, the ketones are better and more efficient than glucose, just like I said before. They yield more ATP, like I said before. After TBI, the number of ketone transporters, okay, into brain cells, they actually, after the concussion, they actually increase by 85%. The brain is screaming for energy. It's screaming for it. This is backed up by a study. Prinz and Giza in 2006 did a big study on CTE. And basically they showed ketones actually lower free radicals. So all the damage produces all these free radicals. It counters oxidative stress, improves mitochondrial function. The ketones lower inflammation. There's a big Yale study that showed where, BHB, actually lowers an inflammasome called NLRP3. Ketones lower apoptosis, or cell death, basically cell eating. It's mainly cell death or apoptosis is mainly how these lesions spread. Okay. Ketogenic diet also decreases the brain swelling. So it's super, super important. I think Dr. Wilson and Dr. Lowry in Tampa, they're actually working with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, if I'm not mistaken. They're working with a lot of the local football teams also to help institute this into concussion protocol. Okay. Super, super, super important. Now, as far as for not being able to build muscle. I can personally attest to that. I am leaner and stronger than I've ever been in my life. Okay. And that's super important for sports like Taekwondo, for Olympic lifting, for CrossFit, for gymnastics. We could go on and on. You want to be in a lot of these sports as strong as you can, as light as you can, right? So if a 250-pound guy squats 500 pounds, awesome, right? But then if a 185-pound guy squats 500 pounds, who's stronger?
Right.
The mass-specific force they produce. So basically, ketones are protein sparing and they're anti-catabolic. So what that equals is increased muscle protein synthesis. So the increase, basically in ketones, it maintains muscle mass and circulating branched chain amino acids. Guess what? That is a study from 1975. Okay, there was a study in 1975 that showed that. Ketogenic diet, it actually prevents muscle protein from being oxidized because the branched chain amino acids, they have a similar structure to ketones. So the ketones are actually burned as a substitute. Insulin drops on keto diet, right? So it gives it a permissive role in promoting protein synthesis. This allows testosterone and HGH to go up. So insulin is very, very, basically insulin drives testosterone, okay? The insulin resistance has been shown, like I was telling you earlier, actually insulin resistance causes testosterone to drop in men and PCOS to go up in women. Real quick, just so people understand, I know we talk about this, what is insulin resistance and what is insulin sensitivity? I want to explain it to people so it's very easy to understand, because a lot of people just don't have a grasp on what it is. Insulin sensitive people are those people that can look at food and eat donuts and eat and not gain weight. Okay. Those are the people that are very, very efficient at using their glucose. So what they do is, if you think of a cell, they have lots of pathways into that cell. Okay. Insulin unlocks the key. It unlocks the pathway into the cell. So they're very efficient at getting all that blood sugar into the cell as energy. Well, somebody that's insulin resistant has about 2 versus 5 or 6. So all that blood sugar is trying to shove into a lot smaller, paths into the cell. So that's insulin resistant. The tissues become insulin resistant. They have less receptors. So insulin sensitivity, good, right? Insulin resistance, bad. Simple way to understand it, okay? So going back to muscle, what's really cool is leucine. Leucine is a completely ketogenic branched chain amino acid, okay? Leucine on a keto diet actually goes up, and guess what? Leucine actually mimics insulin in a ketogenic diet. So, alanine, which is a different one, it's a glucogenic amino acid, actually drops on a ketogenic diet, which is why we think we maintain some of the muscle mass. In keto-adapted athletes, it's important BCAAs for muscle building are spared, and others like alanine are used for replenishing the glycogen stores. So that's why they say, well, how come people on keto diet actually replenish their glycogen stores? Because through gluconeogenesis, we'll break down alanine, a glucogenic and make our own glycogen. So basically, they've showed, adding a ketone ester or a ketone salt. And so people understand what the difference with these supplements are real quick. Ketone esters are just attached to it's an alcohol. The ketone esters are very potent and they really boost. We've used them medically for a lot of kids with a lot of disorders, fatty acid disorders. But what they do is they're not realistic on a daily basis. Okay. Ketone esters really, but there's a really cool video with Ben Greenfield where he does this on video. He was a top Ironman. He actually was ketogenic and he was I think he was like 1 millimolar. He took the ketone ester that he got from Dr. Veach, and he bumped up in 20 minutes to 8, in 20 minutes. Now, this isn't really conducive. This is something you want to do daily basis, Now, ketone salt is basically BHB, beta hydroxybutyrate, a ketone that's attached to an electrolyte, basically a magnesium, a calcium salt, a potassium salt. So those are the difference. And those basically bump you 1 to 2 millimolars, which is something that you want to do will really help on a diet. Daily. That's something you can take on a daily basis to really amplify your diet. So Now, as far as the less inflammation, you actually also get less lactate metabolism. That, like I kind of mentioned, that's an actual Yale study. You can look it up. That's a really good, it was a recent study from 2015. That study actually showed an increased reliance on fat, decreased glycolysis. I mean, like I said, the studies are out there. I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole. Real quick, what are the sports implications? I kind of touched on them earlier. Improved body composition. So you get a better power to weight ratio. Okay. So where this helps is like what I call intense athleticism, right? CrossFit, Ironmans, triathlons, OCRs, obstacle course racers. That's really, really popular. Ultras. Zach Bitter. Zach Bitter is amazing. Look him up. Zach Bitter broke the 100-mile record. Okay. He's totally ketogenic. He ran 100 miles in 14 hours and 46 minutes at a 7-minute, 1-second pace on average. It's crazy. Totally ketogenic. Not running on glucose, not running on sugar. So sports with body weight requirements, like I kind of touched on earlier, taekwondo, wrestling, boxing, MMA, powerlifting. Sports where physical appearance is a component for its success, right? Bodybuilding, physique, gymnastics, dancing. A lot of those guys, some of my bodybuilders have called ketones or ketosis, true ketogenic diet, the missing component of their contest prep. Because, a lot of times going into contest prep, they feel really, really bad. They don't have that. They cut off their energy substrate of carb, but they don't increase their fat, and they bonk. So physique, I respect them. Bodybuilding, it's awesome. Okay. But I see when it's done wrong, and it's done wrong a lot, it produces a lot of hormonal imbalances, a lot of thyroid issues long-term, a lot of testosterone, a lot of estradiol and progesterone issues in some of these women, because it really, really messes with their hormones, the super, super crash dieting. So I respect it. I don't recommend it.
Right.
But basically it has already been established. I mean, it's not even arguable that ketosis or ketogenic diet improves like endurance performance. So you actually have, you get a better sustained fuel delivery. Okay. And just like I said, more and more studies are coming out on exogenous ketones. The one study I kind of mentioned earlier that was pretty awesome. It's a joint study by University of Oxford and University of British Columbia, and they looked specifically at a ketone monoester, and what they showed was that it maintained and sustained elevated blood ketone levels, okay, and it dropped glucose, it dropped insulin, and so what does that mean? Well, it has huge implications, not just for athletes, but medically, okay? People with it basically has huge potential in basically the management of metabolic diseases. Cancer has been established as a metabolic disease. Diabetes, we could go on and on. Almost everything has a metabolic component. So look at things like, I have a very close friend here locally. He's the president. He's a president of the Angelman syndrome. Both his boys, I highly, highly respect him. I work in surgery with him. His name's Dr. Steve Sukin. Both of his boys have Angelman syndrome. It's a very rare genetic condition. These people, Dr. Sukin and his wife, are like some of the best people in the world. But he sits on the chair and he's working very, very close with Dr. Ed Weber at USF. They are fast tracking the use of exogenous ketones for these kids with Angelman syndrome because they have a lot of seizures. They have a lot of seizure activity. For kids like them, kids like status epilepticus, conditions like status epilepticus, there's a lot of conditions. It's not realistic to institute a ketogenic diet with them. So for them, exogenous ketones are a blessing. They're a godsend. So there's a lot of situations where, not just on the sports performance side, but medically, we're seeing that. So here in my clinic, the stuff I've seen over the past, 5 years with just ketogenic diet, but over the past 3 years with exogenous ketones and ketogenic diet has been, crazy. My diabetics, my type 2s especially, lowering their A1Cs, some from 12 all the way down to 6.
Wow.
In a matter of like 6 to 8 months. And of course, we're not saying anything, we're not making medical claims. I'm just reiterating what I'm seeing here in my clinic. And I can back it up with DEXA scan, with blood work, with, all their testimonials also. But not just the body composition changes, but the metabolic changes that are happening with them hormonally, with their diabetes, depression, anxiety. I work a lot with PTSD. I work with a group here in Houston called Camp Hope. They work a lot with our vets. They're being highly, highly mistreated. They go, I won't say where they're going. Everybody knows where they go. And they get written a script, an antidepressant. The typical is antidepressant and an opioid or narcotic, something for pain, or Adderall and Vyvanse for their focus. I've gotten a lot of these guys off. Like I said earlier, I want to get patients off. Have that conversation with your medical provider. Okay. Nobody's having that conversation. How do I get off meds? Mm-hmm. The goal should be to get off meds. Okay. Let's get off antidepressants. New York Times put out a thing this weekend about how dangerous antidepressants are. I've been saying that for 5 to 7 years. Mm-hmm. Antidepressants are a lot more destructive than they are helpful. Right. So again, for me, it's very hard to focus in. I hope I touched a little bit, on sports performance and kind of piqued interest. But there's a lot of validity to the ketogenic lifestyle, which is why we're seeing it explode. Absolutely. We've hit a tipping point. Okay. We don't have a choice. Mm-hmm. So, that's basically all I have for you. I mean, conclusions basically, ketogenic diet, ketones, they're effective. They're proven. I mean, we have now the studies, and the studies are mounting on not just ketosis, but now on other therapeutic applications of like exogenous ketones and ketone esters and ketone salt. So, especially, as far as the athletic performance, what I've seen with my athletes, I mean, all of them are performing better across the board. They're performing better with this. Now, again, not saying this is for everyone. It is just a true viable option. Okay. With backup. Okay.
With the research. And that's what I love with what you said. It's a lifestyle, because so often I think we're in such a quick fix society where people are like, oh, I've heard keto, I can drop some pounds. And so they jump on that. But if you don't truly, and I love how you touched on the keto adaptation. It's not just like a couple of weeks into this and you drop your weight. Like literally it is a lifestyle, because if we go back to eating the way that we used to, then also I'm sure you see it with your patients. I see it with mine, but all of a sudden they realize how lousy they feel if they go back that way,
Yeah.
So
and it's so there's, I mean, we could have a whole other conversation on how food is marketed and and made for addiction, because as soon as somebody goes away from eating carbs and then they go back to eating carbs, just even for a weekend or something, I mean, they start craving it again. They start, so it truly has become an addiction. And the problem is it's starting younger. They're starting to indoctrinate the kids a lot younger. We had 0 documented cases of type 2 diabetes in adolescents and teens in 1980. Now there's over 54,000 a year. We're starting to see, 10% of kids are having fatty liver disease. That's ridiculous.
Right. I agree.
Most ISDs in the nation, they have a deal with a fast food restaurant. They're getting subsidies, and they've kind of made a deal with the devil. So, they don't want to give up that money that's coming into the school. So they have their Pizza Hut Monday, Burger King Tuesday, and they have a healthy option, but I don't know any 16-year-old that if you give them a healthy option and they give them burger and fries, that they're not going to pick the burger, fries, and pizza.
Right.
It's just not. So a lot of it needs to happen on the re-education front. And I really hope that we start to educate earlier and educate the kids on what a proper diet, what proper nutrition is.
Right.
Okay.
And both of us have spoke on this on different things about how just this generation of children, and I don't think anybody's talked about this on the summit yet, but they're the first ones that are going to not outlive their parents' life expectancy rate. Like they have a shorter life expectancy rate than what their parents, for the first time ever in American history. And so, I don't really know many 2-year-olds that are driving themselves through McDonald's drive-through. And so there's a vision being made.
Every 2-year-old knows what McDonald's, what the arches look like. every two.
Mm-hmm.
So the indoctrination starts very, very early, and it's just poison for the kid. I mean, if we just go back to eating like whole foods again, not box processed, even if you just do that, not even, I'm not even talking about all the environmental toxins that we're exposed to every day, from glyphosate, you know, from Roundup in all our food and things like that. So that's a whole other, I mean, you know, we're inundated every day with environmental toxins, with, I mean, so yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole nother topic.
That's
Yeah.
a whole other, yeah, that's a whole other thing. But yeah, I mean, this has been super, super good. And even if we get, God, I always say, even if I got one or two people to change their lifestyle, the reward, it's super, super rewarding, because now there's nothing like getting that text. Like I'm sure you get the text where, oh my God, you changed my life. Oh my God, you know, I've lost this much weight, or I just feel better. My depression's gone. I mean, that's worth all the money in the world. When you truly invest in improving people's lives, like that's reward. I mean, the money comes, that's separate. That's, you know, this is, you know, that's very, very rewarding.
Yep. And that's the reason everybody pretty much got into healthcare.
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
it's just to be able to help people.
Yeah. Now we're actually helping. And I've said this before, for the first time ever, I feel like I'm helping somebody, you know? So
that's huge. Well, thank you so much for your time this evening. It was very informative. So where can they find you? What website? Do you have a website to hand out?
yeah. So, well, we have, on Facebook, we're at Core Sports Recovery, and Instagram, we're at Core Sports Recovery. I post a lot of info and stuff on there. Our website is coresportshealth.com. And you can reach us through there if you're interested. But other than that, I mean, I post a lot of stuff on Facebook and on Instagram.
Perfect. All right. Thanks so much for all your time.
Anytime. Thank you for having me.
Yes.